Art's not for everyone, sir. Try the gift shop. The words landed like spit on velvet. Not shouted, not whispered, just dropped deliberate, rehearsed, humiliating. Langston Reed paused. He hadn't taken more than 2 steps inside the gallery. Just far enough for the light of the foyer to hit his suit midnight navy, custom-tailored in Florence, before the woman behind the reception desk intercepted him like he'd triggered a silent alarm. She didn't check a list, didn't ask a name, just one glance at his skin, his stillness, his absence of a badge, and the verdict was instant. "This is a private event," she added, folding her arms over a clipboard like it was a gate. Langston's smile was patient, controlled. "I believe I'm expected." She scoffed. "We're full tonight. Collectors only." Behind her, laughter flickered, thin and indulgent. A man in a silver blazer near the canapes smirked. "Maybe he's with catering." No one corrected him. Langston didn't respond. He'd heard that laugh before. At 28, when a hedge fund meeting mistook him for the driver. At 34, when a rival CEO called him diversity optics. And now again, dressed sharper than anyone in the room, and still seen as an interruption. He glanced at the nearest wall, a Rothko original. Then at the far corner Basquiat. Then at the receptionist again. "I assure you," he said evenly, "I belong here." But she wasn't listening. She was waving for security. "Before we go on, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And if you believe respect isn't earned by appearance, but by presence, hit like and subscribe. These stories matter. And so do you." Now back to Langston. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't argue. He reached into his jacket, pulled out his phone, and tapped the screen once. Downtown, a server woke up. A protocol blinked live. An acquisition sequence initialized. The receptionist didn't notice. She was already preparing her next insult. "I'm going to have to ask you to step out," she said firmly, "before this becomes an issue." A security guard approached, built like a linebacker, already unsnapping his radio. Langston turned, calm as marble. "I'm not here to cause trouble," he said. The woman's reply was colder. "You already did, showing up uninvited." Then the line that froze the room, "People like you don't usually get past the glass." The words weren't loud, but they echoed in paint, in marble, in legacy. A young woman by the sculpture wing gallery in turn, no older than 23, raised her phone. She didn't know who Langston Reed was, but she knew what she'd just heard, and by the time the night ended, so would the gallery's silence. Langston didn't step back. He stood perfectly still under the gallery's overhead track lights, his silhouette sharp, his presence impossible to ignore. And yet, they were trying to reduce him to a misstep, a stray, a man who wandered into luxury and mistook it for belonging. He was used to it. The last time this happened, he was wearing a hoodie. Tonight, he was in Hermenegildo Zegna. But the reaction was the same. The receptionist had already turned her attention to the arriving guests. Behind him, 2 older white men, casual blazers, confident laughter. She smiled at them. No clipboard check. No hesitation. Langston watched it all without a word. Then, slowly, he turned to face the room, not defensively, not defiantly, just deliberately, like a man who knew where he was, and more importantly, who he was. Self-made, multi-sector investor, quiet majority stakeholder in 5 luxury brands, including one that underwrites the Windsor Gallery's annual curation fund. But none of that was stitched onto his lapel. Tonight, he walked in without an entourage. No name drop, no fanfare, just presence. And still they saw a question mark. At 19, he'd been accused of lingering too long outside a bookstore he couldn't afford yet. At 25, they asked if he was delivering something to the boardroom he was supposed to speak in. At 34, security had followed him in a jewelry store, then watched him buy it 2 years later. He didn't collect moments. He remembered patterns. And tonight was no different. The security guard still hovered at his side, waiting for a nod that hadn't come yet. His hand rested near his belt, not aggressive, just trained. Langston took a breath. On the wall beside him, a framed plaque glinted under soft lighting, featured works from the Langford collection, sponsored by LR Holdings. No one seemed to notice. Or maybe they chose not to read. Across the room, a teenage girl in a cobalt dress whispered to her mother, "Isn't that the guy from the Forbes cover?" Her mother shook her head. No, baby. He'd be inside already. He heard it. Of course he did. But Langston didn't correct her. He didn't announce himself. He waited, because he knew what was coming next. And when it did, when names started getting pulled from databases and phones lit up in the curator's pocket, the people in this room wouldn't just learn who he was. They'd learn who they weren't. A vibration buzzed against his wrist. His watch. Langston looked down. One message. 3 words. Offer confirmed. Executing. He slid his phone back into his pocket. Still calm. Still unreadable. Still the man they never saw coming. Do we have a problem here? The voice came from the left wing of the gallery's sharp heels on polished concrete. A silk scarf tied, just tight enough to suggest control. Olivia Carrington, gallery director. 47, unshakable. She didn't walk so much as glide. Her presence drew instant silence from her staff. Langston turned slightly. Calm. Measured. The receptionist perked up like backup had arrived. He entered without checking in, she said, gesturing like she'd caught someone sneaking in the back door of a fashion show. No RSVP. No pass. I was just about to have him escorted out. Olivia's gaze slid over to Langston. Paused. Something flickered behind her eyes. Recognition? No, not yet. Just suspicion, sharpened by habit. I see, she said, folding her arms. Sir, this is a closed preview for collectors and private partners. Langston didn't move. I know. Olivia's tone tightened. And you are. Before he could answer, the receptionist interjected again, too eager. I already told him this isn't the gift shop. A low laugh bubbled up from a guest nearby, someone pretending not to listen, but absolutely watching. Langston raised a brow. That was when Olivia's assistant, a nervous intern named Kayla, barely 22, tablet in hand, stepped out from the hallway. She had been watching everything from behind a partition, uncertain whether to intervene. Now she did. Ms. Carrington, she said softly, eyes wide. You may want to check the list again. Olivia turned, slightly annoyed. Why? Kayla swallowed. Because he's not just a guest. His name's on the curation fund. The one that paid for tonight's opening. A beat. The receptionist blinked. Olivia's eyes narrowed. Excuse me. Kayla held up the tablet. Langston Reed. LR Holdings. Principal sponsor. His foundation funded 5 of the pieces being auctioned tonight, including the Adler. Suddenly the room didn't feel so tight. It felt fragile. Langston didn't say a word. He didn't need to. Behind him, the gallery door opened again. A courier stepped in crisp uniform, slim black briefcase in hand, walked directly to Langston and handed it to him, silent. Langston accepted it, unlocked the case with a fingerprint scan. Inside a single document folder, ivory paper, gold seal. He turned to Olivia. I came to enjoy the exhibit, he said, voice still smooth. But it seems my presence made that difficult. He held out the folder. I've decided instead to purchase the entire collection. The receptionist gasped. A guest dropped their wine glass. Olivia didn't reach for the folder. Not yet. Her voice was tight. You're buying the exhibit? Langston's smile was razor sharp. Technically, I already have. He nodded toward the courier, who tapped his tablet. A confirmation ping lit up on Kayla's screen. Her jaw dropped. Oh my God, she whispered. It's real. Every piece. Cleared for transfer. Langston turned back to the sculpture behind him. A modern piece, bronze, twisted, nameless. The plaque read, owned by Windsor Gallery. Kayla corrected it aloud, almost involuntarily. Owned by LR Holdings. As of 5 minutes ago, Langston didn't gloat. He didn't have to. The room had already spoken. No one moved. The kind of silence that fell wasn't just awkward. It was sharp, like the moment before a painting is unveiled, except here, the art had already spoken. Langston remained still, briefcase now by his side, the gold seal glinting faintly beneath the track lighting. Olivia Carrington didn't speak. Not yet. Her lips parted once as if she might correct the moment. Rewind it, but no words came. The receptionist stepped backward, her voice trembling now. I didn't know. Langston looked at her for the first time. Not cruel, not smug, just still. You didn't ask, he replied. Calm, even. That's worse. The security guard who had hovered near Langston just minutes ago now looked everywhere but at him. one hand resting on his belt, the other awkwardly sliding to his side. From the far end of the room, a murmur began to rise. A few guests whispered, not in shock but in something quieter. Guilt, maybe. Recognition. Kayla, the intern, was frozen with her tablet still open, confirmation still glowing on the screen. She looked at Langston with the same eyes she'd used to study a masterpiece, not because she was impressed, but because she was trying to understand how she hadn't seen it sooner. Langston broke the moment with a single breath. Then, slowly, he stepped forward just enough for his shoes to echo faintly on the concrete floor. He turned toward Olivia. "I don't need an apology," he said, "and I don't want a scene." He glanced around the gallery, to the walls lined with brushstrokes and ambition pieces now carrying his name. "I wanted a quiet evening. Art. Solitude. A reminder of why I fund this work in the first place." He paused, but what I walked into was assumption, dressed as protocol. A guest near the sculpture wing shifted uncomfortably. Langston continued, voice still smooth, but now heavier. "I've been mistaken for the driver, the assistant, the vendor. I've had security tales and backdoor questions, and are you sure you're in the right place looks my whole life." He looked directly at the receptionist now. "But tonight, you didn't just dismiss a name on a list. You dismissed a person, and you did it with confidence." The woman's face turned pale. "I didn't mean—" Langston held up one hand not to silence her, but to let the silence return. Then he turned, gesturing around him. "You just embarrass yourself in front of every wall in this room." His tone didn't rise. It didn't need to, because now the room was listening, really listening. He let that sit, then added, gently, "The next time someone walks in dressed differently than you expect, try asking their name before you write their story." He walked past her then, past Olivia, past every open mouth and frozen glance, toward the very center of the gallery. And for the first time all night, no one tried to stop him. The sound of Langston's footsteps faded into the open floor of the gallery, but the echo remained. Olivia still hadn't moved. Behind her, the receptionist looked like she wanted to disappear, eyes down, face flushed, lips pressed tight enough to stop the truth from leaking out. But it was too late. The truth was already walking the room. Langston stopped in front of a canvas near the back, large, abstract, layered in deep red and violet strokes. There was no crowd near it, no press, just color and silence. He studied it. Then, behind him, the first voice rose. "Excuse, Messiah?" It was Kayla. She approached cautiously, still holding her tablet like a shield, but her voice, though unsure, carried something firmer than protocol. Langston turned. She hesitated, glanced back at Olivia, then back at him. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry." He didn't respond right away. "I knew who you were when I saw the invoice confirmation earlier today," she continued. "I should have stepped in, but I froze." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. She stood her ground. Langston gave her a single nod. "Thank you for saying that." She nodded back, then turned not toward Olivia, but toward the other staff. "We can't pretend this didn't just happen," she said, louder now. "Not tonight." A few guests overheard. A man in a gray suit adjusted his tie uncomfortably. A woman near the installation wall whispered something to her friend. The murmurs were growing. Then came another voice from the crowd. "This is what happens when you think money looks one way." It came from a woman mid-40s, black, standing near the catering table. She hadn't said a word all evening, but now she stepped forward. "I've been in rooms like this for 20 years, she said. "Donated, volunteered, bought art when no one else believed in the artist. And I still get asked if I'm someone's plus one." Her voice didn't shake. It rose. "And I didn't come here to be reminded that excellence still has to justify its presence." Langston turned, slowly, meeting her gaze. A flicker of respect passed between them, unspoken, but whole. From the edge of the room, a young white man, maybe 30, maybe newer money, raised his phone. Not to record, just to check something. He looked up at Langston, then back at the phone, realization blooming behind his eyes. "Oh, damn," he muttered. Then, out loud, "He's not just a collector. He's the collector." Another beat, another shift. It was no longer just a man being acknowledged. It was a room reconciling who they'd almost dismissed. Kayla stepped back beside Langston. "I'll make sure the artist knows who really owns this now," she said softly. Langston nodded. Then, without turning around, he said the line that turned the entire evening. I didn't come to be seen. I came to see. And suddenly, for the first time that night, the gallery looked back. It wasn't over. Olivia finally stepped forward slow, controlled like she could still salvage what had already collapsed. She adjusted her scarf, eyes scanning the room. Too many phones. Too many witnesses. Too little time. This has gotten out of hand, she said, her voice projecting now. Let's not forget this is a professional environment. Langston didn't even turn around, but the room did. Olivia cleared her throat. I don't care who you are, she continued. This event has protocols, standards, expectations. And you, she gestured vaguely, as if touching his name might stain her mouth. You bypassed all of them. He turned now, slowly. The silence thickened. I bypassed nothing, he replied. I was never allowed to start. That was when the receptionist found her courage again, or maybe just her panic. He never gave his name, she snapped. He didn't even try. Just walked in like he owned the place. From the crowd, someone murmured, he does. The receptionist turned red. He's not a collector. He's a con. Kayla gasped. You don't know what you're saying? Olivia raised a hand. Enough, she said. Try to regain control. We don't throw accusations around, but we do enforce policies. Langston's brow lifted slightly. Policies like racial profiling? Whispers again, this time louder. Someone near the sculpture turned on their phone camera. Another voice chimed in, a young Latino man in a black turtleneck. I saw the list. His name was on it. The receptionist looked like she wanted to scream. He probably added it last minute, she said. That happens. Langston chuckled, not out of humor, but out of history. This isn't the first room where someone's tried to erase me with process, he said quietly. But what you fail to understand is I don't need to argue my place. I just need you to reveal yours. Then he looked at Olivia. And you just did. Olivia froze, because behind her, Kayla's tablet pinged again an internal message. She read it, blinked, then looked up. Windsor Corporate has just joined the live feed, she said, her voice shaky. They're watching. The weight of that sentence fell hard. Langston nodded. Good, he said. Then they'll hear this too. He turned toward the gallery wall, gestured toward a piece labeled Untitled 320,000. I'll keep the artwork, he said, but I'll be requesting that none of the staff here receive commission. Another wave of murmurs. Someone whispered, that's half their salary. Langston didn't flinch. I don't fund institutions that fund disrespect. Olivia stepped forward again, voice rising now. You can't just, but Langston cut her off with a look. Not loud, not angry, just final. Yes, he said, I can. And in that moment, the Windsor Gallery didn't belong to the curators or the critics. It belonged to the silence that followed him, and to the man who had just reclaimed it without ever raising his voice. The silence fractured. Olivia's voice snapped through the gallery again, sharp now, desperate. You think threatening commissions makes you powerful? She spat. It makes you petty, vindictive, and unprofessional. Langston didn't blink. Behind him, Kayla stood frozen, tablet clutched like a lifeline. Guests murmured. Some moved away from the conflict, but most stayed the tension, now magnetic. The receptionist, her voice shaking but still hostile, leaned forward on the podium. I want him out, she said to no one in particular. He's a liability. Langston folded his arms. I'm the principal sponsor of tonight's event, which means nothing without proper vetting. Olivia shot back. This is a curated space, a reputation, and you've turned it into a circus. Then she added the words that would break the final line, security, remove him. Now, the guard who'd been standing by earlier hesitated. His eyes flicked from Langston to Kayla, then to the couriers still standing near the entrance, watching silently. Ma'am, we can't now, Olivia barked. You don't get to walk in by the room and humiliate my staff. You're not a king. This isn't a game. Langston let out a quiet breath. You've misunderstood everything, he said. I understood perfectly, she replied. You used money to make yourself matter. But money doesn't equal credibility. Then she took a step closer. Hand over your ID. Langston tilted his head. Excuse me? You heard me. If you're going to make claims, you'll verify them. Right now, in front of this room. It wasn't protocol. It was punishment. Every head turned. Every camera tilted forward. Langston didn't move. He didn't reach for his wallet. He just looked her in the eye and said calmly, "Evenly no." Olivia's face flushed. "Then we call the police." That did it. Gasps broke through the room like wind through glass. "You're calling the police?" a guest muttered. "On your own sponsor? You think this is your space?" Olivia hissed, her voice trembling with fury. "But it's not. It never was." Langston's voice dropped lower than it had all night. "You're right," he said. "This space doesn't belong to me." Then he turned slowly, gesturing to the art, the floor, the guests, the silence. "It belongs to every person you try to make invisible." Kayla stepped forward. "This is wrong," she said, barely above a whisper. "We can't do this." Olivia ignored her. Langston looked at the guard. "You gonna touch me over a list you never bothered to read?" The guard hesitated. Langston stepped toward Olivia, just once. Calm, controlled. "You don't need my ID." He reached into his breast pocket, not for a wallet, but for a document. He opened it, held it up just enough for her to read. It bore the Windsor Gallery seal, and her own signature. "I authorized tonight's acquisition through your board," he said, "and now I'll authorize what happens next." Olivia's lips parted, but she said nothing, because power, when silent, speaks the loudest. And Langston Reed, for the first time that night, had just raised his voice without raising it at all. Langston didn't lower the document. He let it hover in the space between them, steady as a verdict. The Windsor seal embossed at the top shimmered faintly under the lights, undeniable, unchallenged. Olivia stepped back just half an inch, but enough. Around them, the energy shifted again. Not just tension now, but inevitability. Like gravity had turned, and only one person in the room still had footing. Langston returned the document to his pocket. Then, quietly, he spoke in his watch. "Camilla, begin phase 2. His tone was casual, like confirming lunch. But Kayla's eyes widened. Seconds later, the courier's tablet lit up. He nodded once, tapped the screen. A second notification echoed on Kayla's device. She looked down, then looked up. "Sir," she said softly, "they've frozen internal access." Olivia turned. "What?" Kayla blinked at the message. "All gallery staff logins just went offline. Admin override from LR Holdings." The receptionist let out a stunned breath. "Wait, what does that mean?" Langston answered without turning. "It means no one here can edit inventory. No one can process sales. No one can change provenance data on any piece in this room." He turned back to Olivia. "Until I decide otherwise." Her mouth opened, then closed. No words. Langston continued. "I'd hope tonight will be quiet, cultural, celebratory. But when I'm pushed, I don't push back, I push through." He looked around the room again. "To be clear, I didn't need your permission to attend. I needed your cooperation to stay discreet." Then he gave a soft smile, razor thin. "But you made sure I was seen. So now you'll see me." Another ping. This time, from the gallery speakers, the soft jazz music stuttered, cut off. In its place, a synthesized voice. "Notice Windsor Gallery operations are now under executive review. All transactions temporarily suspended. Please direct inquiries to LR Holdings Compliance Division." The message repeated once. Then silence. The silence was worse. Olivia stepped forward. "You can't." "I just did," Langston said. He walked to the center of the gallery floor. Slowly, his movements deliberate, precise. Every guest turned to follow him. He stopped beneath the central sculpture, the one labeled Untitled, now quietly retagged in Kayla's system as Private Collection LR Holdings. Langston stood beneath it, hands behind his back, posture like marble. "This space will be closed in 10 minutes, he said to no one in particular and to everyone. "But before that, I want every artist represented here to know your work is no longer filtered through gatekeepers who can't tell presence from threat." He looked once at Olivia, then away, then at Kayla. "Start making the direct payment offers," he said. "Full artist share, 0 intermediary commission." Kayla blinked, then nodded. "Yes, sir," a guest near the back whispered. "Did he just cancel the gallery?" "No," someone else replied. "He upgraded it." Langston looked at the art again, and this time it was looking back with pride. Olivia's breath caught. She stood frozen under the weight of her own unraveling authority, surrounded by people she used to control in a space she no longer owned. The Windsor Gallery wasn't hers anymore. Not by function, not by force, and now, not even by perception. Langston stepped forward. No rush, no gloating, just gravity. He stopped beside the reception desk, the very threshold where the night had tried to define him. "I wasn't going to say anything," he began, voice low but unmistakable. "Because real power doesn't announce itself. It just operates." He looked at the crowd, then at Olivia, then finally back to the woman behind the desk whose clipboard now hung limply at her side. "But since identity seems to be the currency tonight, let's talk credentials." He reached into his jacket once more, pulled out a smaller envelope, and handed it to Kayla. She opened it, scanned the content, and gasped. Kayla looked up, stunned. "He's not just the sponsor." Langston nodded. "I'm the lead acquirer of the Langford Collection, the largest private black-owned art fund in North America. A beat. And as of this quarter, I'm also the majority shareholder in the Windsor Gallery's holding company." He let that sink in. Several heads turned. One guest actually stepped back, physically distancing himself from the memory of how he'd laughed earlier. Langston's voice didn't rise, but it cut. "You didn't just mistake a man," he said. "You mistook an institution." He turned slightly, addressing the whole room now. "I've spent years building a system to support underrepresented artists, to fund work that would never make it into these whitewashed walls without being diluted or tokenized. And tonight, I didn't walk in here to prove anything." He paused. "But you gave me the opportunity to demonstrate everything." Kayla's tablet pinged again. She looked down, then back up. "The board just sent confirmation," she said. "Effective immediately, all gallery leadership privileges are suspended pending investigation." Olivia staggered back, as if the words physically struck her. The receptionist covered her mouth. Langston didn't even look at them. Instead, he walked to the nearest wall, one that earlier had felt so impenetrable. He placed a hand gently on the smooth surface beside a newly labeled piece. "Legacy," he said softly. "That's what art is supposed to protect, not ego." Then he turned around. "I'll stay to meet the artists," he added. "But after that, this space will close for 30 days. We'll audit every sale, every contract, every oversight that happened under your management." A man near the door whispered, "He just shut the whole place down?" Langston nodded once. Not for the crowd, but for himself. Because some battles don't need armies. Just clarity. And tonight, clarity had walked through the door in a navy suit and reclaimed every inch of the room. By the time Langston stepped away from the wall, the room had transformed. No longer a gallery. Now a reckoning. Olivia was pale, motionless. Her scarf, once a symbol of composure, now hung crooked, twisted, like it had been yanked by gravity. Her eyes darted across the room, looking for an ally, a rescue, a reset. None came. The receptionist backed into the desk behind her, eyes wide, lips trembling. The clipboard had fallen to the floor without anyone noticing. Guests, once scattered and chatty, now circled closer, not to confront, but to witness. Phones rose, cameras activated, but not in secret. Now, they were recording for the right reason. Kayla stood at Langston's side like a shield with purpose. The tablet in her hand glowed with real-time updates, board confirmations, commission reversals, artist notifications. "For artists just confirmed direct transfers," she said softly. "No intermediaries. They're crying." Langston nodded once. "Good. Let them know their worth was never supposed to be filtered through arrogance." In the corner, the woman in the cobalt dress, the one who'd whispered to her mother earlier, raised her phone and whispered, "Mom, that is the man from the cover." Her mother didn't respond, just nodded, eyes filled with something deeper than surprise. Recognition, maybe guilt. Olivia suddenly stepped forward, voice small, but trying to find authority again. "This doesn't have to be public." Langston turned to her, calm. "But it already was. The moment you decided, I didn't look the part." Another guest spoke up. "You tried to erase the name that built the room you're standing in." Whispers of agreement. Heads nodding. The receptionist took a step forward now, her voice cracking. "I didn't know." Langston stopped her with a glance. Not cruel, not cold, just final. That's the point. He turned to the crowd. How many of you walked in tonight, assuming you knew who mattered, who belonged, who paid for the wine you're sipping? Silence. Then one man raised a hand, slowly. Guilty. Langston nodded. Honesty's a good start. Olivia looked as though she might collapse. But Langston didn't press further. No humiliation. No drag, because justice, when complete, doesn't gloat. He turned to Kayla. Have the artists escorted to the lounge. I'll speak with each of them personally, one by one. Kayla nodded, already moving. Another guest whispered, is he staying? No, someone else replied. He's taking the room with him. Langston walked past Olivia, past the receptionist, past the whispers now no longer mocking but reverent. And as he did, the cameras kept rolling. But this time, they weren't filming a scandal. They were filming history, and they knew it. Langston stood at the center of the gallery, but no longer as a guest. Now, as the force that redefined the room, the final notifications had finished syncing. Kayla's tablet showed new authorizations, a list of staff names, and the temporary locks on their credentials. Administrative, financial, operational. She looked up. It's ready, she said quietly. You have authority to reassign, terminate, or restructure as needed. Langston nodded once, then turned back to the front desk where Olivia and the receptionist still stood, shrinking by the second. He approached slowly. No raised voice. No need. The weight of what he represented now undeniable. You built your comfort, he said, eyes on Olivia, on gatekeeping. He gestured to the receptionist. And you enforced it. Proudly. They didn't speak. Couldn't. Langston continued, voice even. There are people in this room who think this is about money, about art, about access. He paused. But it's about power, and how you used it. The receptionist tried to interrupt. Please, Langston shook his head. I'm not interested in apologies. I'm interested in accountability. He looked at Kayla. Effective immediately, he said. Remove both names from the gallery registry. Strip all administrative permissions. Issue severance in accordance with policy, no bonus, no reference. Kayla hesitated for only half a second, then tapped. It's done. The receptionist covered her mouth. Olivia turned away, trembling. Langston didn't gloat. He just spoke one more sentence, quiet, final, unforgettable. I don't reward disrespect. I replace it. A silence fell again. Different this time. Not awkward, but reverent. He turned to Kayla, who stood taller now. You'll act as interim liaison. Work directly with LR Holdings during the audit. Her eyes widened. Me? Langston nodded. You were the only one who said the truth out loud. Around the room, the guests remained still, some embarrassed, some humbled, some quietly grateful. They had witnessed something beyond art. They had witnessed the dismantling of quiet bias. Langston walked one last circle through the gallery. He stopped in front of the sculpture, the one they tried to stand between him and. He glanced at the plaque, now properly labeled. Then, to no one in particular, he said, I didn't raise my voice. I raised the standard. And with that, he turned, the soft hush of his shoes echoing across marble. The exit was quiet, but the impact would stay long after the last light shut off. Langston walked through the exit without a word. The gallery doors eased shut behind him, soft and slow, like curtains closing on the final scene of a play that no one saw coming, but everyone would remember. Inside, no one spoke. Some stared at the floor, some at the walls now bearing his name. A few guests slipped out, humbled. Others remained frozen in place, as if moving might erase the moment. Kayla stood by the sculpture, tablet still in hand, breath unsteady. He had left her with a task, not just to audit a gallery, but to rewrite its legacy. And she would, because tonight had shown her what power looked like when it walked in quietly and refused to leave unseen. Outside, Langston stepped into the cool night air. The city hummed as usual, traffic in the distance, voices on corners, light bouncing off skyscraper windows. But something felt different. He paused on the steps, looked up, not at the gallery sign behind him, but at the sky, vast, endless, black, and full of quiet brilliance. A memory came. He was 16, North Carolina, outside the first museum he ever visited. He'd worn his Sunday suit, polished shoes, a tie that didn't quite match. They hadn't let him in, not because he couldn't pay, but because he didn't look like a patron. He remembered standing on those steps for hours, watching people enter less dressed, less prepared, but more accepted. Back then, he made himself a promise. One day, I won't need their keys. I'll own the door. Tonight, he kept that promise. Behind him, through the gallery glass, the lights dimmed to closing mode. But this time, no one rushed to escort. No one dared, because even the walls now knew who he was. Langston took one last breath, then reached into his pocket. He pulled out a folded note handwritten, creased from age. It read, "Never beg for entry. Build what they can't deny." He tucked it back in, then walked. No entourage, no applause, just presence. Just a man who'd walked through fire dressed in silence, and left with the building still standing, but never the same. And as his figure disappeared down the sidewalk, a voice echoed behind the glass someone inside. Maybe Kayla, maybe a guest, whispering words that would become the story's spine. Art deserves to be seen. So do we. Fade out.